So, let's talk about misalignment. Why do we care? Why do we really care about whether somebody's aligned or not? Plato had a quote, and I always get this wrong. It's either Plato or Socrates. They had a quote, either one of them, we'll give them both the credit, that said that the beautiful form of the human body is that which works with the least amount of energy. The beauty of form is that which works with the least amount of energy. So what does that mean? Well, we have this force called gravity, right? We talked about engineers developing cars. We talked about architects developing buildings. Their job is to make the most efficient structure that works the best around that force. And so when we talk about alignment, you take a look at this picture right here. Okay? This is the most typical posture that you're going to see of any client, patient that you might see. And why do you think that is?
What did you say?
This is going to be the most typical posture that you would see with somebody coming in with chronic pain.
People working computers.
Right? You're doing it right now.
Their body's reacting to gravity.
Yes. So here's the deal. What we talk about is compensation. What is misalignment actually caused by? And it starts literally at the age of 8. We did a study in San Diego before we moved back up here. Took 4 other certified symmetry therapists. There's massage therapists and acupuncturists that have been certified in symmetry. We took our devices. At that point, it was called a palpation meter, and it was a device that started measuring the body. And that was the next big revelation that I had, was the missing link to understanding people's pains in terms of their posture was the ability to measure them. And up to that point, nobody had measured posture. We just looked at it. So we took these devices and we went to my daughter's school, and the principal at the time was actually going through symmetry, so it was a real easy sell. I said, look, I want to take my crew and I want to measure all of your students. I want to measure kindergarten through 4th grade at their school. And then I was going to measure 5th grade through high school. And I had a theory. What do you think my theory was?
At some point, the sitting caused them to have bad posture.
So my whole gig here is alignment, right? I mean, I do it 24/7. I do it in my sleep, for God's sakes. Everybody that I look at, everybody that I watch walk, it's ingrained in me. It's what I do for a living. So everybody is a miscue or out of alignment in some form or fashion. So I had a theory that because I had measured all these children, and this is where it kind of came to the next revelation, is I started measuring all my clients when I first started symmetry in 97. Didn't know what I was doing. I just knew that this was the next step to take. And what I found were 2 things. I found one was that all my clients that I was measuring were all over the place. Some would have a right hip up, some would have a right hip anterior, a left hip posterior, some would have a left hip posterior and a right hip forward. Everybody was a little bit different in terms of what I measured. But what they started to do was bring their kids into our sessions. And I don't know what prompted me, but I just said one day, I said, hey, you mind me measuring your child? And so I started measuring their kids. And the one thing that I found was that these kids all measured the same. They all had level hips. They all had level shoulders. They all had straight spines. Their legs were standing straight ahead. Their side views were perfectly aligned. And the big revelation was the pelvic tilt. Every kid that we measured, from the PSIS, stands for posterior superior iliac spine, to the ASIS, which is the anterior superior iliac spine, every kid that we measured had a 10-degree tilt. Not a 5, not a 2, not a 14, but a 10-degree tilt. And it was the one link that I then went, aha. Because really what we're dealing with here is physics, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the reality is that there was too much coincidence. Every kid that I measured had that 10-degree common ground. And so we went to the school to find out when that became disrupted, when the whole pattern of alignment became disrupted. And I had a theory that it would be around 5th grade. There were two reasons that I had. The first one was that they had already a previous 4 or 5 years of sitting. The second one was puberty, as they started to change the most. This is when we start growing the most and start changing the most, is around 5th grade. So I theorized that 5th grade was going to be the time where kids showed the big misalignments, and so I went to my daughter's grade school to get my baseline, to prove that, kindergarten through 3rd graders were perfect, and that 4th to 5th started to show those changes. And we're going to do this research again up here, by the way, at some point, because there's a need, right? We can go on a whole nother seminar for that, but there's a need for somebody to step in and prove to the schools that these kids are the reason we have an epidemic in back pain as we get as adults, because nothing's really being done that corrects these issues. Anyway, bottom line is we found out that 2nd graders were already showing huge misalignments. I couldn't believe it. It actually made me really sad. Literally, I had a kid that measured 7 degrees up in one shoulder. Hips 3 to 4 degrees, complete rotation in their pelvis, their pelvic tilts. So sitting really is the first step to misalignment, because it's not our natural tendency, is it? What is our natural tendency? It's movement. So how long does it take to get to standing as a kid, as an infant, on average? About a year, doesn't it? So it literally takes your brain and the neurological connections to your muscle groups to take a full year to go through the processes of actually then finally getting to your feet and then moving, right? And once we get to that point, what happens?
See you later.
You can't stop moving, right? We've all viewed these kids walking around. They don't want to stop. They don't sit and want to just have a cup of coffee. They're moving. They're moving, and you can't get them to stop, because that is the natural tendency, is to get the body to move. And what ends up happening is there's a saying that's called form follows function. You ever heard of that? Ever heard of that? Form follows function. Okay. Well, it's true up to about the age of 8. Because what ends up happening is once we start to move, we facilitate a really good posture. And that posture helps to support that movement. That's the baseline theory of when people come in to see me and they're in chronic pain. I say, look, let's just summarize this in one sentence. If you're standing crooked, you're going to move crooked. And moving crooked is going to wear out your joints somewhere. It just depends on how you are misaligned that causes those joints to wear out. It's as simple as that, guys. It's literally as simple as that. If you are standing crooked, you are going to move crooked. But here's the problem. Once we become statically crooked, moving doesn't correct us. So now our function does not precede form. Does that make sense? In other words, you can't move somebody now just because they haven't been moving for a long period of time. Because think about it. We go to school. We go to high school. We sit more. We go to college. What do? We're sitting even more. Even though I was playing at a Division I school, we were only practicing 2 to 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, I was either sitting or sleeping. It wasn't moving the body. Most of it was spent studying, Ramana, because that's all I did was study. So sitting really is the worst thing that we can do. NASA did a study and found that the loss of postural cues due to the deactivation of the anti-gravity muscles begin within 24 to 72 hours. So if you're not using your body within that time frame, you will already start to show lack of extension, is what I call, or compression is the C word that I use, compression. Pain equals compression, period. If somebody has chronic pain, it means their body is not extended in its natural state. And one of the main reasons that we become compressed is because we sit too much. And in sitting too much, the intrinsic muscles do not have the cues to be able to hold you in extension anymore. It's the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. So this is huge right here. Now, how long do people sit for careers? So think about that. Every third day, they come home and it gets harder and harder and harder to hold the body up in its natural position. So, sitting. Then you have accidents and injuries. I love this picture, right? What happens when we get injured? Let's say that we break a foot or break a leg. What do? So we brace around it, right? And why do we brace around that fracture? To support it and allow it to heal. But in the process, what are we doing? We're creating compensation, aren't we? Because we're no longer able to bear weight evenly on both legs, correct? So how long does that last typically for a break? Month and a half to 2 months is usually the healing time. But in that process, we have developed yet another layer of dysfunction, of compensation. And so it may not be detectable to the eye, but it's a long enough period of time that causes your body to alter its gait, even after you're healed. Because what people do is they don't rehab correctly once they can weight bear again and pull the body back into its proper balance. And so we add these layers and layers and layers. So it starts with sitting. Injuries and accidents is another one. What are other things you can think of? How about this? How about the mouse at the computer? How about somebody who is a musician that does this all day long, 7 hours a day? Or talks on the phone. So these are what we call repetitive stress injuries, where it just causes reading in bed. I can't read, so I don't have to worry about that. Take massage, right? What's the burnout rate? Massage therapists have the highest burnout rate of any practitioner in the healthcare field because of how intense it is, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm still not. It's all about body mechanics.
It's all about body mechanics, isn't it? It's all being aware of how you are, but we don't think about it typically. 5 years, 5 to 7 years is the typical burnout rate of massage therapists, just because of the repetitive stress and the nature of that. I'm working with a dentist right now. Later on, I'll show you a picture of him, but he looks like this. Literally looks like this. Nicest guy on the planet, walks in like this. But he's just sat for years. Years and years and years of just doing this all day long. With nobody coming in and saying, look, you need to correct this before you go into your workday so that you don't sit like that. Remember when you were a kid and you did this? What did your mom say? It's going to stay like that. That's literally what happens to your body, you know? The more dysfunctional situation you put your body in, the more it's going to obtain that form. Okay? In sitting or dentistry or things of that nature, you're just going to pull your body further and further out of alignment. Dominant sports. Take a golfing, for instance. It's a complete unilateral exercise. You look at these golfers, next time you watch a PGA event, I know all of you do because it's so exciting to watch, but watch them walk on the golf course and you'll see them. They're all like this. Because every day, they don't take their body and prepare it for that activity. And this is one of the things I always talk about. It's not the activity that's the problem. We always blame running. You know how many times, you probably have heard this too, how many times people come in and they say, well, I don't run anymore because it hurts my knees. It's bad for my knees. No. It's not bad for your knees. Running is what we were supposed to do until we hit the old dirt nap. We're supposed to run until we're at the end of our life, our existence here on this planet. It's not the running that's the problem. It's the body going into the run that is the problem. And we've failed to see that. Because structurally speaking, we've created so many misalignments and so many compensations that now the running does become an issue. Because you're pounding incorrectly every step you take.